When we think of cults, most of us imagine secretive groups, cryptic leaders, and rituals that defy logic. But throughout history, some cults have gone far beyond bizarre beliefs. They've crossed into terrifying territory, leaving a legacy of manipulation, violence, and psychological destruction. This video uncovers 10 of the most dangerous and obscure cults to ever exist. Some you've heard whispers about, others you probably never knew existed. But all of them share one chilling trait. They exerted absolute control over their followers, often with deadly consequences. These aren't just sensational headlines. Each of the groups we're about to reveal operated under extreme ideologies, convincing their members to cut ties with their families, reject the outside world, and in some cases, commit unthinkable crimes. From doomsday predictions to mass suicides and violent standoffs with the law, these cults have marked dark chapters in human history. What drives people to follow such radical leaders? And what warning signs should we never ignore? Get ready to dive deep into a world of manipulation, fear, and hidden agendas. These are the top 10 most dangerous and obscure cults in history. A chilling reminder that the most extreme dangers often come not from strangers, but from those who claim to hold the truth. Viewer discretion is advised. Aum Shinrikyo. The Tokyo subway. Sarin attack Aum Shinrikyo, founded in 1984 by Shoko Asahara in Japan, initially presented itself as a spiritual organization blending elements of Buddhism, Hinduism, and apocalyptic Christianity. Asahara claimed to be Christ and predicted an imminent global Armageddon. What began as meditation sessions soon escalated into weapons production, human experimentation, and deadly gas attacks. The group attracted highly educated individuals, including scientists and engineers, which made their operations dangerously efficient. The most notorious act committed by Aum Shinrikyo occurred on March 20, 1995, when its members released sarin gas in the Tokyo subway system during rush hour. The attack killed 13 people, injured over 5,000, and sent shockwaves through Japan. This marked the first large-scale chemical weapon terrorist attack by a domestic group in a modern city, showing the catastrophic potential of cult extremism. The group also attempted other attacks and experimented with biological weapons. Authorities arrested Asahara and several high-ranking members shortly after. He was sentenced to death and executed in 2018, along with several others. However, the ideology of Aum Shinrikyo lived on in splinter groups, some of which still operate today under different names. The case remains a terrifying example of how ideology, science, and blind obedience can become a lethal mix. What makes Aum Shinrikyo particularly chilling is its transformation from a fringe religious movement into a full-blown terrorist organization. It operated with secrecy, strategy, and scientific knowledge, traits not commonly associated with cults. Their ability to commit large-scale acts of terror without early detection serves as a grim lesson on the underestimated threat of radical sects. The Order of the Solar Temple. Ritual suicides. Across continents, founded in 1984 by Luc Jouret and Joseph DiMambro, the Order of the Solar Temple was a secret society that combined elements of Christianity, New Age beliefs, and Templar mythos. The group believed in the impending apocalypse and claimed that death was merely an illusion. Members were told they would be reborn on a planet orbiting the star Sirius. This bizarre cosmology masked the group's inner workings, which revolved around strict control, financial exploitation, and staged mystical rituals. What initially looked like an esoteric club for the wealthy elite quickly turned dark. By 1994, a wave of ritual suicides and murders shocked Switzerland and Canada. Authorities discovered charred bodies in a farmhouse in Switzerland, some of which had been shot or suffocated before the fire. Another mass suicide occurred in Canada with similar eerie ceremonial elements. DiMambro allegedly orchestrated these deaths to free his followers and prevent them from realizing the fraud. The group's secrecy, rituals, and apocalyptic messaging were deeply manipulative. Members were subjected to staged miracles, where DiMambro used tricks and hidden technology to simulate divine signs. This reinforced his authority and made questioning impossible. The manipulation ran so deep that some parents were convinced to end the lives of their own children in preparation for the transit to Sirius. The Order of the Solar Temple may not be widely known, but its blend of mysticism, wealth, and ritualistic death left an indelible mark on the 1990s. The group dissolved officially after several high-profile deaths, but questions linger about other surviving members and whether its beliefs continue underground. The tragic story remains a testament to how charismatic deception can lead even the privileged into fatal loyalty. Movement for the Restoration of the Ten Commandments of God, Uganda's Doomsday Tragedy. The movement for the restoration of the Ten Commandments of God emerged in the 1980s in Uganda, founded by Credonia Mwirinde and Joseph Kibwetere. Claiming visions of the Virgin Mary, the group taught that the world would end on January 1, 2000. Followers were required to strictly observe the Ten Commandments, avoid sin at all costs, and surrender their possessions to the sect. Any questioning of the leadership was seen as a direct offense against God, creating a climate of fear and obedience. As the predicted date approached, and the apocalypse failed to materialize, doubts began to surface within the cult. To suppress unrest and maintain control, the leaders staged what appeared to be a mass suicide. In March 2000, over 530 followers perished in a church fire that investigators later determined was a deliberate act of mass murder. Bodies were found locked inside, some poisoned, others stabbed. Evidence pointed to a calculated killing rather than a voluntary sacrifice. This incident marked one of the deadliest cult-related events in history. The leaders, including Mwirinde, disappeared after the tragedy and are believed to have escaped, though some reports suggest they died in the blaze. Survivors described years of psychological manipulation, physical punishment, and complete isolation from the outside world. The movement for the restoration of the Ten Commandments of God is a stark reminder that religious fanaticism, when combined with doomsday paranoia, can become catastrophically deadly. The cult operated with relative freedom for years, exploiting spiritual desperation in a post-conflict Uganda, and left behind one of the most haunting mass murders in modern history. The Branch Davidians, Waco, Texas Inferno. The Branch Davidians were a splinter sect from the Seventh-day Adventist Church, led in the 1990s by David Koresh, a self-proclaimed prophet. Koresh claimed to be the final messenger of God and interpreted the Bible's book of Revelation to justify his teachings. His message included preparing for a final apocalyptic battle with government forces. The compound in Waco, Texas became a fortress of isolation and weapons stockpiling. Allegations of child abuse, polygamy, and illegal weapons possession brought the group to the attention of the U.S. Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, ATF. In February 1993, agents attempted to execute a search warrant, which resulted in a deadly shootout. A 51-day siege by the FBI followed, ending in a fire that engulfed the compound. 76 people died, including Koresh and over 20 children. The Waco tragedy became a flashpoint in debates over religious freedom, government overreach, and law enforcement tactics. While the government viewed the group as a threat, many questioned the aggressive strategies used, especially considering the high number of civilian deaths. The event continues to fuel conspiracy theories and anti-government sentiment. Koresh's ability to isolate his followers, rewrite doctrine, and prepare them for violent martyrdom demonstrates the intense psychological grip cult leaders can have. The Branch Davidians weren't just misled. They were conditioned to believe their deaths were part of divine prophecy, turning Waco into a fiery symbol of cult extremism in America. The Ant Hill Kids, torture under the guise of salvation. Led by Canadian cult leader Roche Thériault in the 1970s and 80s, the Ant Hill Kids began as a commune rooted in self-sufficiency and spirituality. Thériault claimed to be a prophet and sought to create a utopian society free of sin. Initially, the group practiced organic farming and lived communally in the wilderness. However, what started as a back-to-nature movement quickly descended into a nightmare of brutality and abuse. Thériault exerted complete control over his followers. He prohibited contact with the outside world, forced women into polygamous marriages, and punished dissent with extreme physical violence. Acts of torture became routine, including forced amputations, beatings, and even surgeries performed without anesthesia. Children were also subjected to horrific abuse. Followers believed Thériault had divine healing powers even as he mutilated them. Despite multiple warnings and opportunities to intervene, law enforcement was slow to act. It wasn't until a severely injured woman escaped and alerted authorities that Thériault was arrested in 1989. He was convicted of murder and multiple counts of assault and died in prison in 2011 after being attacked by another inmate. The Anthill kids stand out not only for their extreme abuse but for how Thériault disguised sadistic control as religious salvation. His cult's horrifying descent highlights how charismatic leaders can exploit isolation and faith to commit unspeakable acts, often hiding in plain sight. In X4TM, a corporate cult of control. X4TM began in the 1990s as a self-help organization based in Albany, New York. It offered leadership seminars and executive success programs, created by founder Keith Raniere. Under the surface, however, NX4TM operated as a manipulative pyramid scheme and secret cult. Raniere controlled a subgroup called DOS, in which women were branded, coerced into sexual relationships, and blackmailed into silence. Members were promised empowerment but were instead subjected to psychological abuse, extreme dieting, and sleep deprivation. Raniere claimed to be the smartest man alive and used a complex hierarchy to manipulate recruits into obedience. Many high-profile individuals, including actresses and heiresses, became entangled in the group, lending it an air of legitimacy that helped shield its darker practices. In 2018, multiple investigations led to the arrest of Raniere and several top members. The trial revealed shocking details of abuse, including how women were branded with Raniere's initials and forced to provide collateral, intimate material used to blackmail them into silence. Raniere was sentenced to 120 years in prison for sex trafficking, racketeering, and other crimes. X4TM shows how cult dynamics can infiltrate even corporate and elite circles. It wasn't cloaked in religious prophecy, but in modern jargon and success rhetoric, making it all the more dangerous. The case serves as a powerful warning. Charisma, ambition, and manipulation can form a cult without robes or rituals. Heaven's Gate, the final exit for 39 believers. Heaven's Gate was a UFO-based doomsday cult founded in the 1970s by Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles. The group taught that Earth was about to be recycled, and that salvation could be achieved by boarding an alien spacecraft trailing the Hale-Bopp comet. Members were required to renounce all earthly attachments, including family, sexuality, and personal identity, adopting matching uniforms and names. In March 1997, 39 members were found dead in a mansion in Rancho Santa Fe, California, in what remains the largest mass suicide in U.S. history. Dressed identically, with plastic bags over their heads and a farewell video explaining their reasoning, they believed their souls would ascend to the spacecraft above. Each had willingly ingested a lethal mixture of barbiturates and alcohol. The cult had been active for over 2 decades, maintaining a bizarre yet coherent internal logic that kept members isolated from reality. Even as media coverage painted them as eccentric, the depth of belief and discipline within the group was profound. Members were intelligent, tech-savvy individuals who had completely surrendered their will to Applewhite's vision. Heaven's Gate is often mocked in pop culture, but the tragedy is anything but funny. It demonstrates how deeply people can believe in alternate realities and the extreme ends to which they'll go when they think they've found cosmic truth. It also shows how cults can exploit loneliness, science fiction, and a yearning for meaning. The Family, Australia. Mind control and stolen children. Operating in Melbourne from the 1960s through the 1990s, The Family was led by Anne Hamilton Byrne, a yoga teacher who claimed to be the reincarnation of Jesus Christ. Under the facade of spiritual wellness and New Age ideals, she orchestrated one of the most chilling cults in Australian history. Hamilton Byrne adopted children, many illegally, and raised them in isolation, telling them she was their biological mother and subjecting them to a strict regimen of obedience and discipline. Children were heavily drugged, often with LSD, and raised in silence and fear. They were physically punished for minor infractions and had their identities erased through altered birth certificates and brainwashing. Adults in the group were also controlled through medication and spiritual intimidation. Hamilton Byrne's obsession with appearance led her to dress the children alike, dye their hair blonde, and impose military-style discipline in the name of spiritual purification. The cult remained hidden for decades due to its affluent connections and the secrecy maintained by members. It wasn't until 1987 that authorities intervened, rescuing the children from the cult's property. Anne was eventually arrested in the United States, but only served minor legal consequences. Despite the horrors uncovered, the full scope of the cult's influence remains partially hidden due to its entanglement with doctors, lawyers, and politicians. The family stands out as one of the most insidious cults due to its targeting of children, psychological torture, and protection by elites. It exploited the very institutions meant to safeguard the vulnerable, making it an enduring case study in how power, charisma, and deception can devastate countless lives under the guise of spiritual enlightenment. Superior Universal Alignment, a cult of murder in Brazil. Founded in the late 1980s by Valentina de Andrade in Brazil, the Superior Universal Alignment preached a cosmic ideology that mixed alien prophecy with twisted interpretations of morality. The cult claimed that certain children were born evil and needed to be eliminated to purify humanity before a coming cosmic transformation. This terrifying doctrine led to a series of murders and disappearances of young boys in the town of Altamira, Pará. From 1989 to 1993, several boys were found mutilated, castrated, or simply vanished without a trace. A police investigation eventually connected these crimes to members of the cult, some of whom held positions of influence in the community. Although Andrade denied involvement, she was linked to the group's teachings, which were cited by perpetrators during confessions. Multiple cult members were convicted, though Andrade herself was never imprisoned. What makes this case particularly disturbing is the connection between belief and action. Unlike other cults that veered into self-destruction, the Superior Universal Alignment turned its doctrine outward, resulting in real-world violence against children. The use of metaphysical beliefs to justify torture and murder reveals how dangerous spiritual rhetoric can become when placed in the wrong hands. Despite international media coverage, many details of the cult's activities remain obscure. The group's ideology continues to be discussed in Brazil as a haunting example of how fringe beliefs, when left unchecked, can metastasize into community-wide horror. Children of God. Exploitation, disguised as divine love. The Children of God, later rebranded as the Family International, was founded in 1968 by David Berg, a former evangelical preacher who claimed to receive divine revelations. Preaching a distorted gospel centered on love and sexuality, the cult promoted flirty fishing, a practice where female members seduced men into joining the group under the guise of spiritual salvation. This shocking tactic blurred the line between evangelism and sexual exploitation. Berg's teachings also normalized sexual relationships between adults and minors, which he claimed was part of God's plan. Former members have since come forward with harrowing stories of abuse, coercion, and psychological manipulation that took place throughout their childhoods. Despite the cult's global reach, spanning over 70 countries, its internal horrors remained hidden for decades, shielded by isolation and secrecy. After Berg's death in 1994, leadership passed to his wife and stepdaughter, who attempted to reform the group's image by disavowing its most controversial practices. But for many survivors, the damage had already been done. High-profile ex-members like actor River Phoenix and musician Rose McGowan have spoken about the trauma they endured, helping expose the group's abuses to a broader audience. The Children of God is one of the most infamous cults in history because of its global influence, long-standing secrecy, and institutionalized abuse. It illustrates how spiritual language can be weaponized to rationalize exploitation, and why accountability must be pursued even decades after the crimes have occurred. Cults are often born in the shadows, hidden behind promises of salvation, belonging, or enlightenment. But as we've seen in these 10 terrifying examples, what lies behind the curtain is often manipulation, suffering, and destruction. These groups thrived by exploiting vulnerabilities, whether through fear, loneliness, or a yearning for higher purpose. And while each operated in vastly different cultural and historical contexts, they all share one common thread: the devastating power of blind devotion to a single figure or idea. The lessons from these stories are as urgent today as ever. In an age of information overload, where digital communities can foster radical ideologies in isolated echo chambers, The potential for cult-like behavior remains high. What's crucial is learning how to recognize the red flags. Charismatic leaders demanding absolute obedience, isolation from loved ones, fear-based teachings, and the suppression of individual thought. These are the signs that freedom is being slowly but surely eroded. Understanding these dangerous cults isn't just about looking backward, it's about staying vigilant in the present. Whether cloaked in religion, self-help, or New Age mysticism, the threat remains real. By shedding light on these dark histories, we arm ourselves with the knowledge to resist manipulation, protect others, and ensure that tragedies like these are never repeated.